Hello and welcome back to Education on Fire. Today I'm delighted to be chatting to Patrick van der Burght, and he's a business partner of Dr. Robert Cialdini, who wrote the book Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. Now, Patrick is a founder member of the Cialdini Institute, one of the few active Cialdini Institute licensed trainers from around the world. He has been teaching ethical persuasion to professionals and teams since 2000, which helped them accelerate towards their goals, build strong relationships, leaderships, and team management. He co-authored the book, How to Hear Yes More Often, in 2024, and has his own podcast show called Ethical Persuasion Unlocked. Now, I thought this would be such an interesting conversation for us to really appreciate what's going on when we are leading, starting a new project, or building a team in education. Now, this understanding is obviously going to help you, but also the young people that you influence. Hi, Patrick. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Education on Fire podcast. We chat to people from around the world. I think this might only be my second or third conversation all the way to Australia. And then when I have these conversations about is technology good, bad, or indifferent, I kind of think if I can have these conversations, then it's got to be good. And it's great to be able to see you and sort of dive into this important concept, I think, today for many people, because it's something which people are aware of, but I don't think they quite know the power of. So yeah, thanks so much for being here.
I'm really excited to be here, as always. I can still remember the first time that persuasion science, or the science of human decision making, sort of became apparent to me, as in when I was learning it, and I couldn't believe my ears, as in, is this how it works? And I see that same reaction when I do a keynote or I do a workshop and I'm explaining this stuff. I see the eyes get bigger in the audience, like, are you serious? And I remember how that felt for me. And so I love seeing that in the audience. And whilst, of course, we can't see your audience today, I'm sure we're getting some big, some big eyes and ears on the other side. So thank you very much for putting me in this position.
And I guess we should start with that distinction between, persuasion is one thing. Ethical persuasion sounds like something different, but decision making and understanding that overall concept is probably a good place to start, because I think that frames it in a good way for people to understand what we're going to be chatting about.
Yeah, let's start there, and maybe just before that, maybe we should touch on that what is the difference between persuasion, ethical persuasion, and there's other sort of words. Most people, I think, have the tendency, when you say the word persuasion, that what they sort of feel is manipulation, as in, I'm trying to change somebody's opinions or thoughts in a way that might be, sort of forcing them to do that. That's not actually the case. Manipulation is actually taking choice away from people. You're forcing them to do something, where persuasion is actually giving somebody options and trying to bring to the surface information that resonates with what's within them, so that the change comes from within them. There's really no difference between persuasion and ethical persuasion. It's just because a lot of people, they sort of, hang on a second, is this manipulation? We tend to wedge that word ethical in front of it to let people know that, there's no lying, no twisting, no twisting anybody's arm. So all good stuff here today. And research also shows, you can use persuasion science in a way to manipulate and to try and force people. But research shows, thank goodness, that unethical use of persuasion science might produce short-term benefit, but it is long-term disaster, because nobody comes back to a situation where they didn't do good in the bargaining. And within businesses, the use of unethical practices actually has other costs associated to it. A little bit too deep to go into that, but Dr. Cialdini calls that the three sort of hidden cancers of unethical persuasion. And research also showed that if we use this in ethical ways, we produce both short-term results and long-term successes, because it builds strong relationships with our partners. We really aiming for a win on both sides. But yeah, let's let's dive into the science of human decision making, because I think that will explain properly why the principles of persuasion are so powerful and why they're actually getting more powerful as our environment is getting more overloaded with stimuli. So let me venture, interrupt me if you want to, or take notes, circle me back to something. It's all good. All right. So when it comes to decision making, I'm going to lean on the work of a Professor Daniel Kahneman, who unfortunately died a couple of years ago. But he was a professor in psychology and a behavioral scientist. And he won a Nobel Prize in 2002 in economics, which is a little bit unexpected, right? I mean, you would expect, a professor in psychology and behavioral science to get the Nobel Prize in psychology, but that doesn't exist. But what did he come up with that had such an impact on economics? Well, most of his work had to do with decision making, and decisions shape economics. That's where the link is. But he basically won the Nobel Prize for disproving a popular belief that old economics used to have. Old economics thought that human beings are logical, rational creatures, and we would therefore use logic and reason to formulate our decisions. And Daniel Kahneman proved that I was wrong. He says when it comes to decision making, our brain, the brain of our audience, has two parts. And when I say audience, audience is not like, like in a theater or presentation sort of style. Audience as in the recipient of your message. So for teachers listening, that might be the students that you're talking to. They are your audience. Or it might be, somebody higher in the hierarchy of the school that you're trying to get your ideas looked at by or accepted by. For parents, well, it might be your children that are your audience, right? If you're trying to get an 18-year-old to clean up their room, it can be challenging, right? You have to be persuasive. But in the same token, it could also be that, if you're trying to talk to the school to accomplish things or to get cooperation on a particular topic, you're also trying to be persuasive. And of course, if there's students listening to that, of course, your peers, your fellow students are people that you might be communicating with, trying to get cooperation with your ideas. Maybe you need to get an extension on some work that needs to get done, right? You need a few more days, and you're going to have to try and persuade your teacher to grant you that extension, right? And you have to be persuasive. So whoever is receiving your message, that's your audience. Okay, so when it comes to our decision-making brain, Daniel Kahneman says we have two parts. First, we have system one. System one is the intuitive part of the brain. It works very fast, it is always on, and it makes decisions automatically outside of your conscious control. Now, system one works largely on shortcuts, rules of thumb that either are hardwired in us or we have learned from experience. I'll give you an example. So we might have a rule somewhere in the back of our head that expensive equals good, right? We've learned from experience that if you buy something cheap, it doesn't tend to last that long. It's not that good, and it might not be that great for the purpose you bought it for. Where if we spend more money, we tend to get better quality, better suited to purpose, is going to last us longer. And because most of the time this is true, we get this rule of thumb: expensive equals good. So if we're looking at making a purchase of, a new monitor for your computer setup or something, you might not know anything about the technical side of producing a quality monitor. Now, you're in the hi-fi store or in the computer shop, and You could delay your decision. You could leave the store. You could go to the library. You could start borrowing books on monitor construction and all that sort of stuff and read those for about 3 months. And then 3 months later, you might be in good shape to go back to that shop and make an educated decision about which monitor to buy. But I don't know about you. I don't have the time for that. So in that moment of judging, okay, well, which monitor should I pick? I might choose this rule of thumb that I've got in the back of my head and go, hang on a second. If I just spend a little bit more money than I was initially thinking, I will probably have done the right thing here. And that's exactly what will happen. You will probably have done the right thing because most of the time, something that's more expensive is better. It's not always true. Sometimes more expensive things are still rubbish, right? So we do say system one is error prone, but it allows us a shortcut to a quicker decision, right? Otherwise, I'll have to delay my decision or I have to go and do something else. So that's system one. The intuitive part of the brain makes quick decisions largely on shortcuts, rules of thumb. On the other side, then we have system two. That is the logical, rational part of the brain. Now, system two is slow. It is conscious thinking, where system one is outside of our conscious control. System two is conscious thinking. It takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of energy. And Professor Daniel Kahneman actually called it the lazy controller. It doesn't actually want to engage. It's quite happy for system one to take decisions. Only when red flags go off, system two kicks in. Now, system two does have a prerequisite. It needs our attention. I can give you a good example. Sometimes if we're old enough to drive a car, sometimes you drive home and you can't actually remember how you got home. You can't actually remember which turnoff you took or which street you took. You just got home. That's because you were not driving. System one was. But if you're parking a car in a tight parking spot, if you don't pay attention, that's not going to turn out so well. So while system one can drive a car on a relatively empty road, system two is what we need to park in a tight parking spot. So system two can look at all the available options. We do have to pay it with our attention. It takes effort, it costs energy, and it doesn't really want to engage. Okay, now, Daniel Kahneman demonstrates in 2002 that 90% of our decisions are made by system one. That's 90%. Now, because 2002 is a while back, now that's said to be 95%, and that percentage keeps increasing. Now, some people argue with that a little bit. They say, well, I mean, goodness, maybe if it's an everyday decision on where am I going to sit, right? Maybe then I'll use the intuitive part of my brain. But when it's really important, I would use logic and reason. And let's unpack that a little bit real quick. So if we have to make a large decision, and the adults will relate to this, if we look, for example, at buying a house, then that's a big decision. We don't do that often. And so, we might research which suburb we want to buy into. We might compare its value and how it improves with the suburbs around it. We'll then go and visit the schools in the area because the children have to go somewhere. So, what's a good decision? And then once we've honed it down on where we want to be, now we're going to go to open homes and we're going to look at these houses, and we'll come in with a notepad or a tablet and we'll make notes of absolutely everything: how large the garden is, or the balcony, the garage, the bedrooms, how many bathrooms. We'll make notes of everything. And all that is system two work. But how many times have you met somebody that have just bought a house and they say something along the lines of, well, it was a bit above the budget, but we just fell in love with the place, had to buy it. That's not logic and reason. They did do all the system two work, but when decision-making time came, system one took over, right? There were other decision triggers involved. And herein lies the big problem. System 2 is only in charge of about 5% of the decision nowadays. And if we don't know the science, when we sit there thinking, how am I going to convince my students to stay the course and to do the tasks that they need to do so I can prepare them properly for that exam that's coming, right? That's a behavior that you're trying to get them to do. I mean, persuasion is not about sales, advertising, and marketing exclusively. It's about actually behavior. So you might be thinking, how am I going to achieve that with my students? Or, maybe as a parent, how am I going to get my teenage child to, commit to this project or something, let's say. When we don't know the science and we're thinking, how are we going to achieve that? We are using conscious thought. And conscious thought is system 2. And system 2 has a tendency to come up with rationale, with reasons that needs system 2 in our audience to process it. And here is the problem. Our audience doesn't have the time for this anymore. Because the reason that this percentage is shifting from 90% now 95% is because our attention span is getting shorter. Our attention span used to be 20 minutes in the 80s. Mark, do you have any idea what the attention span of the famous goldfish is supposed to be?
It's meant to be a second, isn't it? Or something like that.
Well, I'll give him a little bit of credit. 9 seconds
No.
for the goldfish, 9 seconds. Our attention span is now 7 seconds.
Wow.
We've been beaten by the goldfish, right? And that has to do with our environment. More things are coming at us than ever before. Dr. Cialdini says that, we live in the most information overloaded, stimulus saturated environment that has ever existed on the planet, right? And of course, I mean, the internet had a big impact on us, right? We got to information more quickly and therefore decisions had to be made. But the smartphone was like the nail in the coffin, wasn't it? I mean, you pick that thing up because you need to make a phone call, right? You unlock it. Now there's 25 apps that are popping up asking your attention if you want to interact with them. There's 25 decisions that you have to make right there. Goodness, you might click on something, right? Now something opens and there's a message from him, message from her, link to this, link to that, video here. 20 minutes later, you put the phone down and you go, what did I pick that thing up for? Have you done that? Right?
Definitely.
You didn't even last 7 seconds, right? 2 seconds, you were gone. And so here is the problem, that when we're trying to convince people, trying to persuade people to do something, to accept what it is we have to say, unless we know the science, we will come up with logical, rational arguments that are going to cause them to push back from your proposal. They decide not to decide. And the other flip of the coin, if we actually do know the science and we just present people with a little bit of information that has to do with system 1, allowing system 1 to make an easy decision, now we get more cooperation. And that can be have a big impact. Actually, one of my favorite examples has to do with children in school. I think this was in a university. There were a number of students and they were facing expulsion. And only if they were able to raise their grades by a full letter would they be able to stay in school. And so the students in that situation were randomly divided into 3 groups. And they were given different instructions. They were all given access to the exact same assistance from the educational staff, the same materials. The only thing that was different was the instructions that they were given. The first group was not asked to set any study goals. The second group was asked to think about study goals and sort of, keep them in their head. The third group was asked to set study goals, to write them down on a piece of paper, to sign it, to then go make photocopies, and to hand a copy of these goals to each of their fellow students in their class. Now, they were all treated the same except for the instructions that they were given, right? And we could argue that for each student, the impact of the outcome of this was going to change the trajectory of their life, right? Let's imagine that they really wanted to stay in that educational institution and they were faced with being expelled, which will probably have a decent impact on their future. So let's assume that they all wanted to stay and they were all very keen to do the best they could. Now, the first group that wasn't asked to set any study goals, how successful were they? Well, 14% of them were successful enough to raise their grades by a full letter and were able to stay in school. 86% were told to leave. What about the second group? It seems like a good idea, right? Ask people to set study goals. They actually didn't do any better. Also, 14% of them raised their grades enough to stay in school, and the rest was expelled. What about the third group? They did better. Out of the third group, who were asked to write down their study goals, sign it, print it out, and hand it to everybody in class, out of them, 86% raised their grades enough to stay in school. Now, the reason why I like this, because it hits the point home so nicely, is that because we did this study, or because they did the study, we didn't, because that study was done, we now know that, and this is linked to the principle of consistency, we'll get into that, because that third group was treated differently and they were asked to make an active public commitment to what they were doing, they had more internal pressure to follow through with that decision where the other two groups didn't. So because of this study, we now know that we can have an impact on somebody's follow through in getting to a goal that arguably everyone wanted to achieve just as badly. But because the study was done, we now know that we could do better. Without the study, we wouldn't have known. I mean, after the study, can you imagine being one of the parents of the kids who were in the 14% group? How pissed off would you be, right? That just at random, your child ended up in those two experimental conditions. And as a result, 86% of them were asked to leave. Now, I'd hate to bring it to everybody, but unless you know the science of ethical persuasion, and knowing is one thing, but having application skills to use it, unless you know this, you are in the 14% group right now. Right? So I'm looking forward to changing that. Does that all sound exciting so far, Mark?
Yeah, I think it's great, and I think, like you say, it's very easy to just get in your lane. You know what you know, it's what you've experienced, and you replicate it, and it works or doesn't work, and your experience kind of gauges what that might look like going forward. But like you say, once you understand what's happening, you understand the science, and you can be intentional about what you're doing, then it really feels like you say, you can change that on a dime because you're doing it with intention and knowledge, and then being able to put it into practice. Yeah, so I'm excited to see where you're going to take us with this now.
Yeah, and so the thing to realize is that all of us have a certain amount of possibilities, success that is right there on the table. If we only communicate in a way that allows that success to realize. If we don't do that, like arguably out of every child, every student that was in that study, everybody in the three groups were able, 86% of them should have been able to achieve high enough grades to stay in school. But because we didn't know the science or two groups weren't using it, we suffered a loss that was avoidable, right? And so I sort of see the world like this. I hear people communicate, and I hear them missing the ingredients that would get their audience to lean in, or to trust them, or to have more loyalty, or to build relationship. And so there's so much that we can have that we're letting slip through our fingers. And that's why I was so excited to get on your show, Mark, is that there's the World Economic Forum at the moment, right? They put a report out every 2 years. And last year they put a report out. It's called The Future of Jobs. You can look it up. And they ranked leadership and social influence as the third most urgent skill for businesses to develop in their employees. Now that's great, right? As in, you're in the middle of your career and now you're shaping these skills, or you're learning them. But we should be learning this before we go into the workforce. I mean, think about it. Why would you write a job application without knowing how to be persuasive? Why would you go to a job interview without knowing how to be persuasive? And goodness, if you get hired, now you're going to have wage negotiations without knowing how to be persuasive, right? This is a very important soft skill we need to learn early in life, not halfway through. It's great if you learn it halfway through, you're really excited, but it really should happen early on. And that's why I'm so excited to be here, to hopefully have some impact on some young individuals as well. All right, so let's dive into principles. I'm excited. There are 7 universal principles of persuasion, and we call them universal because they work in all languages, all cultures, and all countries, which is incredibly powerful, right? Because our cultures are intermixed, but it's also very easy to interact with people in other countries. So this is something that works everywhere. So there's 7. Let's go through them, and I'll give you the rules of what powers them, why they work. Let's start with one that we all know. Actually, you probably know most of these, but you might not know what activates them or what amplifies them. All right, so reciprocity is one of them. You know, as in, do something for someone, help someone, and things flow back to you. Why does that work? Because people have a tendency to want to give back the same type of behavior that was first given to them. And in the context of compliance, people are more likely to say yes to someone, to agree with someone, to move forward with someone if they feel they owe that person something. And so in business, for example, we've taken that as in, we got to give people stuff, which is in essence correct, right? If you give something to other people, things flow back. We've all been to the supermarket, and there's somebody there with a tray of cheese or pieces of sausage or cups of yogurt, right? And you can take a sample. Now, most people that take the sample think that does not change their behavior. But the data is very clear. If we look at like sales figures from companies like Costco and something, it doesn't matter what you give away, sales go up. And what I find fascinating is that, let's say it's cheese. And let's say that you try a sample and you don't like it. Doesn't matter. It still works because you'll just buy more of something else, because it's not about the cheese. It's about the behavior. You were nice to me. Now I need to be nice to you, right? And so from reciprocity, what we learn there is that basically we should think how can we help the other party genuinely and seek to assist them without purposely trying to create a situation where they feel they need to reciprocate to you, as in you're not doing it to get a return, but you're genuinely trying to help people. All right, so that's reciprocity. Again, I'll let you take notes, and if you want to circle back, if we have got time, be delighted to. For now, I'll jump on to the next principle of liking. We like people that are like us we like people that like us, and we like people that like us and say so. Now, that's a big mouthful, so let's dissect that a little bit. People like people that are like them is similarities. People that like, we like people that like us. I think we're all familiar with that concept, right? If you have a friend that likes you and you say, hey, I'm moving house on Saturday, there's a good chance they'll say yes. Where if you walk up to a perfect stranger, well, you ask them if they'll help you to move, they'll probably say no, right? But then we also like people that like us and say so. And so that's compliments. We are suckers for compliments. Even compliments that are brought up to try and convince you, they still work. We love compliments, but there's no need to, come up with false compliments. You could just genuinely look for something you can compliment someone on. And seriously, it's a really cool experience. I challenge everyone listening. The very first person that you meet, not even necessarily speak to, meet after this podcast, pay a genuine compliment. You might meet somebody in the elevator when you've arrived at work or something. Look for something you genuinely like. Might be a tie, might be a pair of earrings or a handbag or something. If you like it, pay a compliment. See their energy change, their shoulders drop, smile appear. It's a great habit to get into. And liking is a good relationship builder. So what we learned from liking, for example, is that can have a big impact on our success rate. KPMG, which is a big accounting firm, they did some research on this. They looked at the relationship between account managers and their clients and how strong they had an algorithm for that to measure how strong the relationship was. And then they looked at how successful they were in getting agreement from those clients. And so if there was a weak relationship, the agents were only about 30% successful in getting agreement. When there was an average relationship, it was 45% success rate. And for those account managers that had a strong relationships, they were 70% successful in getting agreement from their clients. That's more than double. And other studies say that as well, that if you have liking, if you have a strong relationship with people, you can easily double the chances that you'll get compliance or get a yes from someone. And I'm pretty sure intuitively we also know that, right? When you meet someone, you have a bit of a chat, or you ask, what's your hobbies? What are you into? What's your favorite food? Right? You have a bit of a chat, that's good, but what's hidden behind the surface is that the more similarities you uncover, that's when the liking starts to grow. So it's not about how much you share, it's about how many similarities you find. All right, let's move on. Then there's a principle of unity, which is the last principle Dr. Cialdini, after much additional research, brought to us. It first appeared in his revision of his book, Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion, that was published in 2015. Unity is about a sense of community that we have. If you ever sat in an airport and you talk to somebody who's from the same town as you, or you were born in the same suburb or something, all of a sudden you got this familiarity with each other. You could have that with the next person that is on a review board considering if you should be accepted in a university, right? Or, if the principal of the school is making life harder for the teachers, right? If you can figure out what you have in common, that's good for liking. But if you're part of a community that you both feel part of, that activates unity. A very powerful principle. All right, I'll move on. So then we have this principle of social proof. Social proof, that word a lot of people have heard of. It was actually Dr. Cialdini that coined the phrase. Before that, it used to be referred to as consensus. Social proof explains it a little bit easier in the name already. We follow the actions of others, especially when they are numerous and when they are similar to us, and when we are uncertain. And in business, you see there's a lot of businesses, they have testimonials and reviews, which are the opinions of other people, right? And they use that because it's a very important motivator, and it reduces uncertainty. So that's good that they use that, but social proof has a lot more things to offer. I've got a cool example related to social proof. Dutch high school students, they were told that a lot of students like them would eat fruit to stay healthy. And the students said, well, I don't care that you've told me that. I'm not going to change my behavior. I'm not going to eat more fruit just because you told me, right? But then when later the consumption of fruit was measured, it had gone up by 35% because it's one of those shortcuts, right? If other people like me are doing it, it must be the right course of action. So social proof is very powerful. I've got some other stuff as well. As I told you, Mark, I made some notes before we started. When college students were told, which wasn't true, but they were told that other students like them thought that torture was acceptable during interrogations, 80% of those college students then also agreed that that would be acceptable, right? So we follow what other people do. Students who were worried when they started at a new school or a new university about their performance and how they would fit in, when they were told that a lot of students like them had experienced similar sort of feelings but overcame them and did very well, those students calmed right down and also did very well. So we follow the actions of others. All right, then we have the principle of authority. So authority works because we have a tendency to follow the advice of other people who know more than us on a particular topic, people who are experts in a particular field. That's why, when somebody wears a white coat and a stethoscope, we don't even ask them if they're, if they paid attention in school when they got their, they studied to be a doctor, right? We might have a problem with our big toe. How do we know they even paid attention when it was big toe day in medical school, right? We don't know, but they've got the white coat on, they've got the stethoscope on, and we therefore accept what they have to say. And sometimes that is also wrong, right? System one, it's error prone. Some people take the advice blindly and pay for it with their lives. But yeah, we follow the actions of people who have more knowledge or wisdom than us, which makes sense because we can't possibly know everything about everything. And if there's someone in the room who knows more about it, it makes sense to follow their advice. So in terms of when we are presenting something to someone, if we have information that an expert has said that this was a good thing, then that makes that message stick, right? Or people pay more attention to it. With authority, it's also on us, as in we have a certain level of expertise. And so how do you convey that to your audience so they early on respect that you have knowledge and wisdom and should take what it is you have to say with the gravity that it deserves? One common mistake people make is that when they meet somebody, they start singing their own praises. They come in and say, "Hi, my name is Patrick. Let me tell you the 34 reasons why you should listen to me today." And the subconscious goes, "You're full of yourself," right? We lose authority. We hope to get more authority. We will lose on authority and we lose liking, right? Which is why I can't introduce myself and talk about my credentials. That's why Mark's done that, right? Because that's one of the socially acceptable ways you can get someone else to introduce you, introduce you and your credentials. So, for example, if one teacher is meeting with parents and another teacher is, let's say, met first, and let me introduce you to my colleague. The colleague cannot sing their own praises or credentials, but the first teacher, if they're doing the introduction, they have a beautiful opportunity to bring to the surface some genuine information about this colleague of theirs. So, oh, great, you're here. Let me introduce you to Michael. Michael's been at the school for 12 years. He's won multiple awards, and he's got this and this and this, and he's a really, really great guy. The students love him, right? Now that parent is going to listen to that colleague in a much different way than if they didn't know any of that background. And Michael was not able to introduce himself like that. All right, 2 more principles left. So, consistency. People have a tendency to want to stay true to past actions and statements that they've made. Because if we say we'll do one thing and then we do something else, people don't like that. We have nasty names for people that say they do one thing and then do something totally different. And because we don't want to be labeled like that, actually, we know we're harsh labeling other people like that. We don't want to be labeled like that. So we will go to great lengths to stay true to past actions and behaviors. Now, that explains my earlier example with the schools, with the students that were facing expulsion. Group 1 didn't set any study goals. Group 2 set study goals but kept them to themselves. Group 3 wrote them down, and then, that's good because it's active, but by making photocopies and sharing it with the other students, now other people knew the intention that they had made, the statement that they have made, as in, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that to raise that grade enough. And because other people knew, it produced more internal pressure to stay true with that decision, even though for all the students in all the 3 groups, the impact, the importance of doing that action was just as large, right? But it was that internal pressure that got people to stick to it more, and they achieved their goals. So that's consistency. And then lastly is this principle of scarcity. We value things more that are rare, that are scarce, that are dwindling in availability, and things that are unique. Again, a educational related example. There was a school that had a campus cafeteria, and students were asked to rank their satisfaction with the cafeteria, and they were not happy at all. It was generally they were dissatisfied with the quality of food and drink that they got at the cafeteria. 9 days later, they did another survey, and it had dramatically changed. They now really valued the food and the drink that they could get at the cafeteria. What had changed? Well, on the day of the second survey, they had been told that there had been a fire in the cafeteria and they would not be able to have any food or drinks there for the coming 2 weeks. Now it was scarce. Now it was more valuable, and therefore their appreciation, the value that they experienced, increased. Nothing changed in the food, but now they valued it more. So those are the 7 principles. And so if we know how, and of course I can only give you a little bit here, right? Just a brief introduction. There's a lot more to this. So it doesn't take that much to study this properly. But what we need to do is we need to look at the situation that we're in, and we need to, we say we need to be sleuths of influence or detectives of influence. We need to look in the situation, which bits of information are genuinely there in the situation that we can bring to the surface? Have I done something for this person in the past? So now that they sort of owe me something. Is there similarity between us that I can bring to the surface, or can I pay a compliment to them? Unity, is there a community that we both feel part of? Are there actions of other people similar to them that I could bring to the surface, which would be social proof, right? Have I done what I can to increase my authority and trust and credibility, which is also part of authority, but I haven't touched on? Is there any previous commitments that people have made that I can remind them of that they did? Or can I create a situation where I allowed them to make a statement earlier so that later on I can work that in my proposal? I'll give you an example. Your friend comes up to you and goes, "Hey, you're an adventurous kind of person, aren't you?" And most people think they're adventurous, right? And so you probably go, "Oh yeah, I'm adventurous." "Oh, that's awesome. That's great. Hey, we're going on a bike ride in 2 weeks. You want to come with us?" I've just put my foot in it saying I'm adventurous. It's now harder to say no, right? You can feel it. So consistency. Or is there something about this situation that is genuinely rare, rare, dwindling in availability, scarce? Is time running out? Is there a certain quantity running out, right? We can bring that to the surface. And there's, of course, a lot more to that. Not every principle is right at the right time, but we can use these principles to raise information to make it easier for people to make a yes decision. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really, really good because as you were talking there, I was thinking, as a musician myself, as someone who educates people into learning drums and percussion, that sort of thing, there were certain parts of that I thought, oh yeah, I've obviously done that naturally in some way. But there was also other parts where I thought I could really lean into that. It's something I'm sort of aware of, but I could definitely make more of. And I didn't know enough about it to be able to kind of articulate it in a way which now, even just from our sort of brief conversation of explaining these sort of principles, I think, right, I can see where that benefit would come and how different people that I'm dealing with would respond in different ways. Like you say, it's taking some of those depending on the situation and I guess the personalities and how you're sort of interacting with people that's going to make the bigger difference.
Yeah. And often just being a nice, genuine, interested individual, that's already makes you, that's a nice foot in the door in being more persuasive. If you genuinely try to help people. I mean, if you're a student and, there's a teacher and, I don't know, you do things in the classroom to sort of help them out or that sort of stuff. You can't help that teacher will have favoritism towards you. So if you're just a nice person that helps, if you're interested in people, if you try and have a little chat, genuinely interested in what they like, you might uncover similarities, things like that. But then, of course, sometimes we do it and then often we do not, right? And that's where some skill and some learning comes in. I know that we're probably running a little out of time. We're probably going a little bit longer than you usually do, and I hope everybody's still glued to their speakers. I just wanted to, before you, I'm happy to take any questions. I just wanted to make sure I raised this. How we dress has an impact in how people perceive us. This has to do with the principle of authority. And incidentally, I've got a podcast channel myself. Mark knows it's called Ethical Persuasion Unlocked. And as we're recording this, just this week, we published an episode number 19 about trappings, as in the outward clues of success, and how you dress, how you portray yourself, how that impacts you, and it can have a big impact. And there's one thing I wanted to bring to the surface because it's related to getting a job. In this research, they looked at people who went to a job interview and what they were wearing. And if the person was wearing a designer outfit or a well-styled outfit, they were hired more quickly. And on average, they got a 10% higher starting wage. just because of what they wore. Because especially when we meet someone, we are uncertain about what to think of them. And we look for clues to give that away. And if somebody's well dressed, it gives an aura of economic standing and ability, that we know what we're doing. And we know from research as well that, for example, pretty people are experiencing a lot of favoritism, and we see them as more intelligent and having more capabilities. But by just dressing well, I mean, the old saying, dress to impress, it's really true. You want to look your best. We don't want to go and hire an Armani suit to go to an interview, right? That'd be unethical, because then you'd have to return it, and the next time you turn up in your tracksuit pants, right? And it's all goes out the window. But with the clothing you have, it's okay to dress up and make people look how successful you are, or what sort of background you come from. All right, cool. Any
Fantastic.
questions, Mark?
Yeah, I think my question would be actually to people listening is that kind of, from having sort of gone through those 7 principles and understanding that, to actually be able to articulate, a bit like you said about the 3 lots of students. It's one I've just thought about, like I mentioned to you, I was thinking about this time, and actually now I'm aware. But actually, going away, writing down which one of those really struck you, an idea that comes to you that you can step into or lean into when you're doing a next class or next project with something, or how you're going to interact with somebody differently, because you want to have a better relationship, or you want to, for a better word, you want to make their decision making about their learning, or you want to persuade them to take more interest in what they're doing because they have the potential, but you haven't quite managed to do that. I think maybe making those things a bit more concrete, like I said, writing them down, sharing them with a colleague, sharing them with somebody around you that you can actually put those things into place yourself, having just heard what we said, and then actually seeing how that then influences the people that you're teaching, or the people around you, or the circumstances you're doing. That'd be really interesting, and do let me know as well, and it'd be fascinating to see how that comes about.
Yeah, now, I don't know how often this happens, but I mean, normally I work with companies, right? So when we have team members, and let's say, I want a team member to perform a certain task by a particular time, I could talk to that person one-on-one and say, hey, can you get this thing done on Wednesday? Right? And they might say to me, yeah, I think I can do this on Wednesday. But in terms of how public that commitment was, it was just me and them talking. Where if instead I have a staff meeting and everybody's sitting around the table and they go, Sally, can you get this thing done on Wednesday? Yeah, okay, great. And Bob, can you do that thing we talked about on before Thursday? Now their commitment is made in front of other people, and it's more public. And then we know that more of this stuff is going to get done. So the same thing, could happen in a classroom. Instead of having a student sort of, when everybody else has left, and say, hey, we really need to get down into this. Are you going to commit to study, da-da-da-da-da? If you do that one-on-one, you'll have a certain level of success. But the science would say if you ask somebody when the other students are listening, you should get more success.
Yeah, I love that. And there's one example I just wanted to share based on that social proof, because as a musician, and especially young people, when they start to do their first performances, they get comfortable in the practice room. We've had lessons, it all feels good. Then it's kind of, and now we're going to do a really nice informal concert in front of parents and some of the staff and sort of the people that are learning instruments as well. That feels very different. The heart's racing, the adrenaline's going, and they're not sure. And it's a really hard thing to get over, other than to say, I know what you're going through. It's an experience that I've had. But I think because you have the opportunity there to see other people performing, to be able to say, I remember when this child was in your age bracket who was really nervous with their first one, but understood what that was, stepped into it, got the experience they needed, and now look at what they're able to achieve because they're a few years older, they've been playing for longer, and like I say, that social proof of kind of this is possible, and you now understand what they went through. It wasn't that they're different to you, or that wasn't an experience that they had, but you can sort of see that sort of next step. And I sort of love that as a way of being able to sort of share maybe something which feels quite scary, obviously, because it's an emotional thing they're doing, but something they'll understand and then sort of see the next step, even if they haven't quite walked through it yet themselves.
And it's a perfect example. And similarity amplifies social proof, right? So let's say if you have a young woman or a young girl who is going to perform publicly, if you got, let's say, some more advanced students who were all male to tell her, oh, you'll be okay. We had the same feeling, but you get over it, and we love it now, right? That'll be good. That's social proof. But if instead you had 3 girls saying that to the girl, it's more similar. I mean, you can feel it, right? Then it'll be more impactful, and you'll get the desired behavior more so.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, the acronym FIRE is important to us here at Education on Fire, and by that we mean feedback, inspiration, resilience, and empowerment. What is it that strikes you when you see and hear that, and what would you like to share in relation to it?
Okay, well, I am a trainer and a teacher. I can't help it. You've got the word feedback on there. And this, in a way, is linked to the principle of unity. When you ask somebody to give you feedback or help or assistance, you tend to get a critic. As in, they're now going to look at your situation and tell you, well, you could do this better this way. Where if you use, this is what, I don't know if you ever heard this, the word because is, if anything, let's say magical, right? Because when we were younger, our arguments with our mom and dad used to end up in it because we kept asking why, right? Well, just because was normally the end of the discussion, right? So the word because has sort of magical power. It's one of our favorite words. But in a similar way, the word advice has a similar sort of power. When you ask someone for advice, not a review, not feedback, not help, you ask for advice, you get someone who aligns with you. You get a partner. So stop asking for feedback, help, or a review. Ask people for advice. Get a whole different energy. But I'm going to have to pick the word empowerment, of course, which is very much what I'm about. All of us have so much potential for success. It's right there on the table. We just need to know in a better way how to communicate. And I'm all for that. And in line with that, and I'm sure you will supply that in the show notes as well, I'll provide a hyperlink where you can go to my website and help yourself to some complimentary educational materials, including an ebook that you can download. You don't even have to give your name or your email address, just right click and download. We've got some a 1-week email challenge where you get a piece of persuasive insights every day. And there's also some information there for schools that might be, or schools, universities. I'm happy to donate my time up to a certain point to help introduce these topics in schools. I mean, you're in Australia, of course, I can go locally. I travel a lot, so I might be able to visit internationally as well. But otherwise, via Zoom, quite happy to zoom into a session in schools and introduce this topic to empower kids to, first of all, be introduced to it, but also give them some helpful things to use as they're preparing to go into the next school, which they might have to apply for, or maybe looking to land that dream job that's going to change their entire future. So all that information will be there on that hyperlink.
Fantastic. Patrick, thank you so much indeed for sharing. Thank you for that offer as well. As you said, we'll make sure that all the details to how to connect with you and all of that will be in the show notes, so people can easily do that. Get in touch, take him up on that offer, and take him up on the things that he has available for you, so that you can grow, learn, and share that with the people around you. And I think it's such an important thing in this world of AI, where knowledge is less, understanding each other and connecting, and all the things we've spoken about today are going to be the key things for people to thrive going forward. So yeah, thank you so much indeed.
That's great. And yeah, so the podcast is also a great place to start. Ethical Persuasion Unlocked. Please follow it. And yeah, my website, ethicalpersuasion.com.au, because I'm based in Australia. Lots of information there as well. So anyway, thank you, Mark, for the opportunity to introduce this to everybody. And if I can ask those listening a favor, making podcasts is a lot of work. I know now. And we don't have that much of actually direct contact with you as listeners. Mark would love it if you took 2-3 minutes to write a little review about his podcast on the various places where you listen to podcasts. Something with a little bit of details in it in terms of your experience and how valuable you think it is for other people to also pay attention to his podcast. I'm sure Mark would appreciate it very much, and so would I.
Thank you so much indeed. Great to chat to you, and likewise, let's reciprocate that and make sure you've listened to Patrick's as well, because we're all podcast lovers here. So that is indeed a great place to start. So yeah, thanks so much, Patrick. Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire.